Have you ever stood in front of someone you once loved deeply and realized you no longer needed to be chosen by them? Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, the place where love doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just nods and walks away with dignity. If you've ever wondered what happens after the heartbreak, after the silence, after the gallery lights dim, then stay close, because this is where the real story begins. Now, let's begin. Celia hadn't thought about Darian for 3 full mornings. That might not sound like much, but for a woman who once measured time by the rhythm of his breathing beside her, 3 mornings of mental silence felt like reclaiming a country. She didn't check his social feeds, didn't read his name in headlines, didn't wonder whether he was thinking of her. She simply drank her coffee, rolled paint over canvas, and opened her gallery on her own schedule. But that morning, she paused. Her fingers hovered over the drawer that held the invitation he'd never responded to, the one she mailed him weeks ago, before the gallery opened, the one with no return address. She hadn't expected a reply, not a text, not a message. What she hadn't expected was what came instead. A package, no branding, no return name, just a flat, rectangular box delivered quietly to the back of the gallery 2 days after the opening. She opened it alone, under low gallery lights, with no witnesses. Inside, photos, dozens of them, some from their early years, some she thought she'd lost, and one new addition tucked carefully at the top. It was a sketch, hand-drawn, charcoal on cream stock, of her, sitting, head down, legs crossed, hair swept over her shoulder, the same way she sat during the exhibit's first hour, when she was too nervous to speak to anyone. Underneath it, in barely there pencil, still the center of the room, she stared at it for a long time. Didn't cry, didn't call. She placed it behind the counter, unframed, but safe. Across the city, Darian sanded the edge of a wooden chair. His sleeves were rolled up, and the front of his apron held streaks of stain and glue. It had taken him 2 weeks to build. The curve of the backrest mimicked the bend of Celia's spine the night he saw her at the gallery. Straight, but tired, beautiful, but distant, present, but not available. He didn't name the piece, didn't sign it, didn't tell anyone why he crafted it. But when a visitor at the foundry asked what it was for, he simply said, "Someone who used to make silence feel safe." That night, Darian sat alone in his apartment, not the penthouse. He hadn't gone back to the top floor since she walked out. Too big, too clean, too cold. Instead, he rented a quiet corner loft. Brick walls, creaky floors, uneven windows. The kind of place she would have loved. The kind of place they'd probably still be laughing in if he'd never traded love for legacy. He didn't hang her picture. He didn't light candles. He simply sat in the quiet, staring at a blank wall, replaying that nod. Not a smile, not a wave, not even an invitation, just a simple nod from Celia, surrounded by strangers, standing inches from the man who had once promised to never stop seeing her, and then did. He had wanted to follow her, wanted to say something, anything. But that moment had felt sacred, like speaking would cheapen it, so he didn't. Celia stepped into her gallery early the next morning, before the emails, before the press inquiries, before the world. She needed the silence. She hung a new piece in the entry hall, one of her own, unannounced. It was simple, a cracked wooden frame, empty in the middle. Nothing inside, no glass, no canvas, no art, just space. And underneath it, a single card that read, "Absence, seen." Visitors walked past it all day, unsure if it was finished. Some whispered, some took photos. No one asked. But by closing, someone left a sticky note just beneath the frame. "It's not empty, it's breathing." Celia folded it and placed it in her pocket. That weekend, Darian attended no galas, no fundraisers, no dinners. Instead, he spent his Saturday walking through a flea market. No bodyguards, no assistants, just him in an old hoodie, scanning through used furniture and chipped pottery. A woman at one of the booths asked him, looking for something special. He paused, then shook his head. No, he said, looking for something real. He didn't find anything worth buying. But he did leave with a memory, an old couple sitting on a bench under a string of rusted lights, sharing a sandwich, not speaking, just existing, side by side. He hadn't felt that kind of ease in years. On Sunday, Celia lit the jasmine candle she once threw out. She'd pulled it from the storage box by accident, planning to toss it. But her fingers didn't. She stood still for a long moment, holding it under the morning light. Then she struck a match and let the scent return. And as the scent filled the room, she whispered under her breath, "Maybe peace is remembering, without pain." By late evening, she wrote a note. Short, no drama, no color, no emotion. Just one line, written carefully in ink. Some things can be built twice, with better tools. She sealed it in an unmarked envelope. Hand-delivered it to a courier. No address. Just a drop point, Darian's foundry. She didn't wait for a reply. She didn't need one. She had spoken. And sometimes, that was enough. Darian sat at the long work table in the back of the foundry, his eyes fixed on the small cream envelope in front of him. He hadn't opened it immediately. Something about it felt fragile, like the paper might dissolve if handled too quickly. The handwriting was unmistakable, Celia's, and the moment he recognized it, the buzz of the world went silent. He finally opened it an hour later. One line. Some things can be built twice, with better tools. He read it 3 times, then again, then closed his eyes. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even an invitation. But it was something he hadn't felt from her in months. Openness. Not forgiveness. Not return. Just a crack of light between the bricks of what he broke. And in that instant, something inside him softened. He stood up, walked across the shop, and opened a wooden storage box where he kept pieces of their old life, photos, journals, her notes, even one broken vase she once insisted on gluing back together. At the bottom of the box, he found what he was looking for, a photo, not of them, just her. Celia, barefaced, tired, laughing anyway, taken during the renovation of her first design studio, hair tied in a messy bun, white tank top speckled with paint, holding a hammer in one hand, flipping him off with the other. He'd snapped it on accident. She made him promise never to delete it, and he didn't. He placed that photo inside a new envelope along with a charcoal sketch, his first drawing of her. On the back, he wrote a single line, "I see you now, not just in memory, but in full, no name, no return address." He didn't send flowers, didn't attach a gift, just sent it with a courier addressed to her gallery. And then went back to work. Celia opened the envelope near sunset. She didn't expect anything back. She hadn't written the note for a reply. She wrote it because the silence between them had become too sacred to fill with noise. But now, a response. The photo made her laugh. The sketch made her stop breathing for a second. But the words, "I see you now," not just in memory, but in full. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She folded the paper carefully and placed it inside the drawer of her desk, right on top, not buried, not framed, just accessible. 2 days passed. She didn't reach out. He didn't either. But the air between them, wherever they were in the city, shifted. At the foundry, Darian cancelled 2 investor meetings, not because of her, because of himself. He'd started building something new. It wasn't furniture. It was a wall, half-finished, brick and wood. Built inside the main workshop, for no purpose other than learning. He needed to remember what failure felt like, to build crooked, to get splinters, to not know what he was doing, and not fix it immediately. Sometimes, growth wasn't success. Sometimes it was discomfort without control. He ran his fingers along the uneven grout, and for the first time in months, he felt honest. Celia returned to her favorite corner of the gallery, the one with the skylight. She lay flat on the floor, staring at the ceiling, sketchbook open across her stomach. The light changed color as the sun moved. She stayed still for a full hour. She didn't want to run anymore, didn't want to hide behind clients, schedules, ambition. She whispered quietly into the stillness, "What does love look like when it returns healed?" No answer came, but she liked the question. On Saturday, a young girl walked into the gallery with her mother. The girl was maybe 10, quiet, holding a sketchpad of her own. Celia noticed her staring at one of the steel and glass pieces. "You like that one?" she asked softly. The girl nodded. "It looks broken, but it's still standing." Celia kneeled beside her. "Sometimes, that's the most beautiful kind of strong." The mother smiled. "She wants to be an architect one day." The girl added, "But I also like drawing people." Celia handed her a blank note card. "Draw someone you love who doesn't see you yet." The girl paused, then started sketching right there on the floor. 15 minutes later, she handed it back. It was rough, almost childlike, but powerful. A person with no eyes. Just a hand outstretched, holding flowers. Celia blinked back, something rising in her chest. She whispered, "That's beautiful." The girl shrugged. "It's not finished." Celia smiled. "None of us are." That night, she lit the jasmine candle again. The scent filled the loft. She poured a glass of red wine, put on music, let the silence live with her, not against her. And for the first time since the lounge, the moment everything cracked, she asked herself, what if this wasn't the end? Not because he deserved her back, but because people could grow, people could change, people could come back for the right reasons, and maybe so could love. Across the city, Darian opened his windows wide for the first time. The cold blew in. He didn't close them. He wrapped himself in a throw blanket she once bought, sat on the floor and whispered, "This time, I won't fix her. I'll love her as she is, or not at all." And the wind didn't answer. But he didn't need it to, because in that stillness, he was finally becoming a man worthy of her nod, and more than her memory. If you've ever chosen silence over shouting, if you've ever stepped away not out of hate, but out of hope, hope that maybe, one day, the love you gave will return with better tools, then this story is for you. Tell us in the comments, have you ever walked away to protect your peace? And if you believe real love can return, when both hearts have done the work, hit that like, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories, and share this with someone who's still healing in silence. Because sometimes the loudest "I love you" is a quiet, honest rebuild. It was the kind of late October morning Chicago didn't warn you about. Grey sky, wet air, and a chill that settled deep in the bones. Celia didn't mind. She liked days that didn't ask for attention. Days that let her disappear inside her work without guilt. She stood at her gallery's front window, sipping warm tea from the chipped ceramic mug she refused to replace. The sculpture Darian carved, his quiet olive branch, still sat on the pedestal near the back. She hadn't moved it, hadn't labeled it either. People asked. She always said the same thing, "It's not for sale, it's for memory." Some understood, some didn't, but no one touched it. And that silence became part of the gallery now, like background music, only she could hear. Her assistant, Mira, peeked her head in. "There's a delivery out back. Looks like a box." Heavy. Celia raised a brow. "I didn't order anything. Want me to check?" Celia shook her head. "I've got it." She walked through the quiet hallway, past installations of glass and reclaimed wood, and stepped outside into the sharp morning air. There, on the delivery bench, sat a square wooden crate. No address, no stamp, just her name written once, in small handwriting she recognized instantly. Darian's. She stared at it for a second, then opened it slowly. Inside, neatly wrapped in fabric, were the photographs she thought she'd lost in the move. Snapshots from the first gallery they built together, from the old apartment with the leaky sink, from Venice, from the winter they got snowed in and made pancakes until midnight, and one she didn't recognize. Celia, asleep on the couch, sketchpad still open on her lap. Darian must have taken it quietly. Tucked inside was a slip of paper. A single sentence. What I failed to frame, I never forgot. She didn't move, didn't blink. Her fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the box. This wasn't him begging. This wasn't him asking. It was him acknowledging what he failed to protect, what he saw too late, and what he still remembered. She picked up the couch photo and held it close to her chest. The past had a strange way of arriving when you stopped expecting apologies. That afternoon, Celia closed the gallery early. She needed space, not because she was overwhelmed, but because she wanted to think in full silence. She sat at her drafting table in the loft. No music, no calls, no distractions. Then she opened her drawer and pulled out a blank envelope. Her hand hovered over it. She wasn't writing for him. She was writing for her, for the version of herself that used to journal hope into every corner of their life, for the woman who once whispered, "Please see me every night in bed," without saying a word. She grabbed her fountain pen and wrote, "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I started loving myself louder." No name, no explanation. She folded it carefully, placed it in the same box the photos came in, then called the courier service. Same drop location, no signature required. Darian received it 2 hours later. He didn't open it at first. He knew it was from her. He felt it, and maybe feared it, not because of what it said, but because of what it might not say. When he finally unfolded the note, his eyes didn't scan. They absorbed, word by word. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I started loving myself louder." He read it again, then sat on the wooden bench he'd built last winter, alone. He didn't cry. He didn't panic, but something in him shifted, because for the first time, he didn't take her words as rejection. He took them as truth, and truth, no matter how painful, was always a beginning. That weekend, a call came through from a local arts non-profit. Celia almost let it go to voicemail, but something told her to answer. "Ms. Tranier," the voice said warmly, "we're hosting a city-wide panel on independent design and creative business growth. We'd be honored to have you speak." Celia paused. "Thank you. I'm flattered. When is it?" "Next Thursday. Location?" Elara Civic Forum. That made her smile. Quietly. "Who else is speaking?" There was a pause on the other end. "Darian Holt is also on the panel." She exhaled. Didn't say no. Didn't say yes. Just let the pause breathe. "I'll confirm by tomorrow." She hung up, leaned back in her chair, and stared at the ceiling. She wasn't afraid to see him again. She wasn't angry either. But she knew, being in the same room, under the same lights, sitting beside the man who once made her feel invisible, would test everything she'd grown into, and that was worth preparing for. At the foundry, Darian received the same call. He didn't hesitate. "I'll be there," he said, then added, more to himself than anyone else, "I won't speak for her. I'll just speak true." And that was all he could offer. The Elara Civic Forum wasn't a loud place. It was sleek, polished, professional, designed for impact without spectacle. Much like the two people now scheduled to sit on the same stage, 10 feet apart, under soft, white lighting, with an audience that had no idea what history breathed between them. Celia arrived first, black pantsuit, low heels, hair tied back. She didn't dress for effect. She dressed to breathe. Her gallery had been closed for 2 days, her phone muted, her calendar wiped clean. She needed the silence. She needed to walk into this room with nothing but her presence. When the host greeted her backstage, they spoke casually. "You okay sitting beside Mr. Holt? We can shift the seating." Celia offered a calm glance. "That won't be necessary. I didn't come to avoid anyone. I came to speak." Simple, unshaken. Darian arrived 8 minutes later. No entourage, no no PR team whispering in his ear. Just a messenger bag and a fresh shave. He wore a navy wool jacket over a black collarless shirt. No tie, He didn't wear the look of a man trying to impress. He wore the look of someone trying to show up as himself. And when he saw Celia already seated on stage, sipping from a plain bottle of water, he paused, then nodded. She didn't smile, but she nodded back. And in that brief, wordless exchange, something clicked into place. Not forgiveness, not familiarity, but readiness. They were both ready to sit in the same room without hiding. The panel began promptly at 6 p.m. 3 other speakers, 2 moderators. It wasn't about them, but when it got to Celia's turn, the room leaned in. She spoke clearly, no fluff, no anecdotes meant to distract, just truth. Design, at its core, is about listening, she said. You can't create what you can't hear. And for years, I was building rooms while ignoring my own voice. She didn't look at Darian, but she didn't need to. The sentence wasn't a dagger. It was a mirror. She continued, the gallery I run today wasn't born from ambition. It was born from aftermath. And sometimes, that's when your best work shows up. After the silence. After the disappointment. After you stop curating yourself for someone else's vision, there was no applause. Not because the room didn't care, but because they were too still, too locked in. Then it was Darian's turn. He didn't shift in his seat, didn't clear his throat like he usually did before speaking. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, and said, entrepreneurship has a way of making you believe the louder you are, the more you matter. Then, a pause. But I learned recently, the people who truly matter to you usually whisper, and if you're not careful, you'll drown them out with your own ambition. The moderator interjected, was there a moment that taught you that? Darian didn't look at Celia. He didn't need to. He simply said, there was a room, full of people, and the only person I hoped would see me didn't need to anymore. The silence that followed was deeper than applause. Celia didn't flinch, but her fingers curled slightly over the edge of her notebook. After the panel ended, everyone stood. Photos were taken. Conversations sparked in corners. Celia didn't linger. She grabbed her coat and moved toward the back exit. Not rushing, just finished. She didn't owe anyone extra energy. But then, as she stepped toward the hallway, she felt a presence behind her. Not close, not invasive, just present. Celia. She turned. Darian stood there, hands in pockets, no guard up, no performance. Thank you, he said. For what? For speaking from the version of you I never deserved. She didn't soften, but she didn't walk away either. You listened, she said. He nodded once. I am now. They didn't say more. But that moment, that 10-second exchange in a quiet hallway with cold air sneaking through the cracked exit door, that was the first real conversation they'd had in months. And it didn't end in tears or silence. It ended in acknowledgement. Celia drove home with the windows cracked. The fall air cut across her collarbone, sharp and grounding. She didn't cry, didn't smile. She felt steady. And sometimes that was more valuable than closure. Sometimes steadiness was closure. Back at the foundry, Darian didn't go straight inside. He sat on the steps out front, elbows on knees, eyes on the sidewalk. He whispered under his breath, not to her, not to anyone, just to himself. She doesn't owe me a return, but I owe her the man I promised I'd become. And for once, he meant it. Celia stood by her gallery window before bed that night. Lights off, candle lit. The small sculpture he'd carved still stood untouched. But now, it no longer felt like a ghost. It felt like a timestamp of a version of them that had been necessary to reach the people they were becoming. She whispered, maybe we'll meet again, as full people, not missing pieces. And then she turned off the lights. The email subject line read, Community Build Day, panelists invited to join. Celia almost deleted it. She was halfway through reviewing material samples for her winter gallery reset when it popped up. Another public appearance? She wasn't in the mood. But something in the body of the message stopped her. A hands-on art and architecture event hosted for inner-city students. Non-profit-led, Interactive booths. You're invited to guide a session in design thinking. You and Mr. Darian Holt are our featured contributors. Her lips pressed into a line. Of all the names to pair with hers, she stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the half-empty street below. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even discomfort. It was awareness. This was the third time their names had landed side by side in the same week. Organically, no manipulation, no staged reunion. Maybe the city hadn't moved on from Chicago's royal pair. But Celia had. Still, something in her gut said, you should go, not for him, for them. The students, the ones coming to the event hoping to see people who looked like success and sounded like themselves. And more importantly, the ones who deserved to see what respect looked like after damage. She clicked accept. At the foundry, Darian stood at his workbench, smoothing the surface of a new side table. He hadn't seen the notification until Morgan, his assistant, flagged it. You're scheduled for Saturday, she said. Design plus mentorship collab for youth creatives. They want you to share your early architecture sketches. He grunted in response. Celia's on the lineup. That made him pause, but not hesitate. Let it stand, he said. Sure? Yeah. It's not about me. She nodded and left him alone. Darian stared at the tabletop. He knew what it meant. Same event, same air, same public space, but unlike before, he didn't plan his words. He didn't even practice his talking points. He just reminded himself, this isn't a strategy. This is a service, and that was different. Saturday came with wind. A sharp breeze cut through the event tents as volunteers unloaded crates of supplies into the large civic center's back lot. Celia arrived early. No makeup, denim jacket, canvas sneakers, hair pulled into a low bun. She didn't look like the woman who graced gala photos. She looked like the girl who used to paint murals in abandoned buildings for free. And that was the point. This wasn't about aesthetics. This was about presence. Darian arrived 15 minutes later, carrying a toolkit and a flat wooden panel. He wore jeans, a grey hoodie, and a simple work vest. No logos, no labels. When he stepped onto the lot, he noticed her immediately, but he didn't approach. She was already bent over her booth setup, helping a teenage boy align 2 wooden planks. So he got to work too, 2 tents apart, both teaching, both laughing, both completely focused on the moment. The irony? Not one student recognized them as ex-spouses. They just looked like passionate professionals who happened to be nearby. And that anonymity was a kind of gift. Midway through the event, a little girl wandered between tents, holding a juice pouch and a clipboard. She was maybe 7. At one point, she looked between Celia's booth and Darian's and asked her mother loudly, "Are they married? They look like they're supposed to be." The mom chuckled, shrugged, and whispered, "Maybe they used to be." Celia heard it. So did Darian. But neither of them looked up. They didn't need to, because some truths sit comfortably in the air, needing no defense. During the closing hour, the lead organizer approached both of them. "I didn't realize you two had worked together before," she said, genuinely surprised. Celia smiled politely. "Once. A long time ago. Well, you two draw a crowd. The students are calling your booths the master class zones." Darian gave a soft laugh. "Tell them we're still figuring it out. They're learning either way," the woman replied. "Presence is everything." She walked off, and for the first time that day, Celia and Darian made eye contact. No tension, no weight, just acknowledgement. After the crowd dispersed and most of the booths were packed up, Darian walked over to where Celia stood, wiping paint off her hands with a cloth. "Nice work today," he said. "You too." They stood for a beat. Then he gestured toward the tent behind her. "You still draw better with chalk than I do with CAD." She chuckled lightly. "And you still talk like blueprints are gospel." He smiled, and in that smile, she saw something she hadn't in a while. Ease. Not effort, not guilt. Just a man standing in front of her with nothing to sell, nothing to hide, and nothing to demand. just presence. She looked at him, then back at her clipboard. I'm glad you came. I'm glad you let it happen. She nodded. He nodded. No lingering. No promises. Just mutual respect. And, maybe, the slow return of safe space. That night, Celia sat on her balcony with her sketch pad, reliving moments from the day. Not because of him, because of the kids. Because of the way one girl said, "Your hands look like mine when I draw," and it made Celia tear up. Because of the boy who asked, "Does your art get sad when you're sad?" And she answered, "Yes, but it always survives." And because, for the first time in a long time, she saw Darian not as a memory, but as a man learning how to be present, and that was worth remembering. Cleanup was quiet. The sun had dropped low behind the community center, casting long shadows across the lot. Tents folded down. Tables stacked. The last of the student-made structures stood on display, marked with chalk signs and colorful tape. Celia walked slowly between the booths, double-checking the supply crates. Her fingers were stained with blue paint, the cuffs of her jacket dusted from sawdust and outdoor grit. Behind her, Darian carried a wooden board to the tool shed. He paused when he saw her. "You left this," he said, holding up a sketch pad. She turned, reached for it. Their hands didn't touch, but the space between them thinned. "Thanks," she said, flipping through it. "I saw the one the student made. Shelter for Feelings." It hit. Celia gave a slight nod. Kids see what we try to cover. They stood near the last folding table, the air cooler now, the kind of early evening chill that reminded her of nights spent building her first studio, with Darian, in silence, after arguments they never finished. He motioned to the side of her boot. "You're bleeding paint." She glanced down. Blue splotches marked the white rubber sole. "It's permanent now." Darian cracked a half smile. Proof of effort. Celia folded the sketch pad. Proof of presence. The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It carried a different kind of weight now. Acknowledgement, not discomfort. Darian leaned his hip against the table. "You ever think we worked better with tools than words?" She looked up at him. "Tools are honest. Words, not always." He let that land. Then, after a second, "I'm learning." She didn't roll her eyes, didn't retreat. She just said, "Good." They moved together naturally after that, stacking brushes, coiling cords, wiping down palettes. Years ago, they would have done this after a full day of designing side by side, usually with a takeout menu nearby and jazz on low. Now, no soundtrack, no dinner plans, just shared motion. And maybe that was something. As the last tent folded, the event organizer approached. "We'll be locking up soon. You two were incredible today." "Thank you." Celia gave a light smile. "Glad the students found what they needed. Hope we'll see you again," the woman added. "Some of the teens already asked about internships." Darian nodded. "Happy to show up where it matters." After she walked away, Celia turned toward her car, then paused. He was still standing there. No expectation in his stance, no hopeful glance, just steady quiet. "I'll leave the sculpture in the gallery," she said. He looked at her. "You don't have to." "I know, but it belongs." "Not because of me?" She shook her head. "Because it was made during the part of you I want to remember." He accepted that, didn't push for more. She moved toward her car. Before she opened the door, she turned slightly. "You're better in these spaces, where nobody claps." Darian nodded slowly. "I'm trying to live where I'm not performing." And then she left. No long stare, no glance back, but with every step, something softened. Celia returned to her loft, shoes still flecked with dirt and art supplies. She kicked them off, set her sketch pad on the table, and poured water into the kettle. The windows were fogged from the difference between the inside warmth and the dropping temperature outside. She wiped one with her palm and stood there, breathing. She thought about the boy who built a table shaped like a heart and said, "Because love should hold things." She thought about how Darian taught a girl to hold a drill without flinching, and didn't once correct her tone or method. and she thought about how quiet he was. Not empty, present, and presence, she knew now, was louder than words. Darian didn't go home immediately. He stopped by a late-night diner, grabbed a coffee to go, and sat on the hood of his car parked beside a mural downtown. The mural was faded now. A layered piece Celia had helped design 6 years ago with students from a local art school. It showed hands, open palms, lifting beams of light. He looked up at it and muttered under his breath, "Maybe we're not lifting each other anymore. Maybe we're just letting each other breathe." He finished his coffee, drove back to the foundry, and didn't turn on the lights. He sat in the dark for an hour, not thinking, just being, and it was enough. At the gallery, Celia returned to her usual Sunday ritual. Candles, soft jazz, no phone. She framed the student's sketch, Shelter for Feelings, and placed it beside the sculpture Darian carved. They didn't match, but they belonged in the same space. Like contrast and complement, she exhaled and whispered to the room, "Stillness can be shared, even when the story's unfinished." And with that, she turned the gallery lights off. The invitation wasn't dramatic. It was a forwarded email with a short line at the top, "You should come." The kids asked if you'd be there. Darian sent it without expectations. Celia replied 1 hour later with a simple, "I'll be there," quietly. The event was small. Just the core group of teens from the community project showing their finished structures at a pop-up night inside the local library's atrium. No press, no speeches, just student work on display, soft music, and trays of lemonade and brownies made by volunteers. Celia arrived wearing charcoal slacks and a cream sweater. Her hair was loose. Darian wore jeans and a navy coat, hands tucked into his pockets. They didn't walk in together. But halfway through the event, Celia turned to find him standing beside her at the Shelter for Feelings sculpture. The teen artist who made it was explaining her process to a guest across the room. Darian glanced at the structure. "She said it was inspired by you." Celia nodded, not proud, just grounded. She asked what feeling to carve into a frame. "I said, the one you avoid." She chose tenderness. Darian took that in. "You taught her that with one conversation?" I asked. She answered. The art followed. He nodded again. They stood there, side by side, not touching, not pressed for dialogue, just breathing. Later, when the lights dimmed and students packed up their models, the event coordinator approached Darian and whispered something. He turned to Celia. "They need help moving the folding tables, loading docks at the back. I told them we'd handle it." She raised an eyebrow. "We," he smirked. "You're here. You're capable." She followed. 10 minutes later, they were in the loading bay. The night air was brisk, but the work was easy. Tables folded. Boxes lifted. When the last cart rolled out, Celia wiped her hands with a napkin and leaned against the side wall. Darian didn't speak right away. He stood a few feet away, watching the fog from their breath disappear into the cold. "I never apologized for what happened that night," he said quietly. Celia didn't move. "Which night?" Elara Noir. Silence. She looked forward, not at him. "I didn't go there to find closure," she said. "I went there to find out if you still saw me." He stepped a little closer. "I did?" "You saw someone, but it wasn't me." He nodded. "Why now?" she asked. He paused, then said, "Because now, I see the version of you I never took time to understand." She looked at him. "And what version are you now?" He breathed in, slowly. "I'm not fixed, I'm not polished, but I don't hide behind ambition anymore. I don't perform loyalty, I live it. I don't run from silence." She studied him, not with skepticism, with patience, then said, "I'm not looking for a speech. I know. I don't need flowers. I brought none. I don't trust quickly anymore. I wouldn't either." She stepped away from the wall, closer now, only inches between them. "You hurt me, I know. I built a life without you. I'm proud of you. You don't get to show up and expect a rerun." "I'm not asking for a rerun," he said. "I'm asking for one moment, one dinner, no scripts, just us, not to rebuild, just to see who we've become." Celia's eyes didn't flicker. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She stepped past him, toward the door, then turned back. Next Friday, 7 p.m., your place. I'll bring the dessert. And with that, she walked into the cold. Darian stood frozen in the dock, his breath rising in clouds, a small, stunned smile on his lips. No begging, no grand gesture, just a beginning. That night, Celia journaled for the first time in weeks. She didn't write about him. She wrote about herself, how she had learned to feel the weight of her silence and trust it, how she had learned that leaving didn't always mean running. It could mean returning stronger. She ended the entry with one line: maybe I'm not afraid of him anymore. Maybe I'm just not afraid of me. Darian cleaned his space twice, not because it was messy, because he didn't want anything to distract her. He dusted the bookshelves, rearranged the pillows, removed the wine glasses he thought might look too forced. He set the table simply: 2 plates, cloth napkins, lemon water. No centerpiece. The air was still. At 6:56 p.m. he sat on the couch. No music. No TV. At 7:01 p.m. there was a knock. He didn't rush. When he opened the door, Celia stood there, holding a small paper bag. Her coat was wrapped tightly around her, cheeks pink from the cold. "I brought brownies," she said. "Store-bought? Baked by me. Burned slightly on one side." He smiled. "Welcome back." "I'm not back," she replied. "I'm here." He stepped aside. She walked in. The dinner was light. Roasted chicken, steamed greens, warm rice. Nothing showy. They ate mostly in silence, exchanging brief glances, comfortable enough not to fill space with noise. When she finished her plate, she pushed it slightly aside and leaned back. "This place hasn't changed." He nodded. "I thought about moving. But then I realized the space isn't the problem. The presence in it is." Celia looked around. "It's quiet now. No assistants, no deals on speakerphone, no proof of productivity hanging on the walls. I like it better." He studied her face. "So do I." She reached for the paper bag and set it in front of him. "You should try one before judging." He opened it and took a bite. His brow lifted. "You didn't burn these." "I scraped the edges." He grinned. Resourceful as ever. Celia sipped her water, then placed her glass down carefully. "Before we pretend this is easy," she began, "I need to say something." He didn't interrupt. "When I left the lounge that night, I didn't cry because I was hurt. I didn't cry because you were with her. I cried 2 days later, when I realized I didn't miss you." His throat tightened, but he nodded. "That scared me more than the betrayal," she continued, "because it meant I had disconnected long before that moment, and I hated that part of myself." He cleared his throat gently. "I think we both started pretending too early. Pretending we were okay. Pretending work was just a phase. Pretending connection could survive on history alone." Celia's eyes lowered to the table. "But here we are," she said. "Still not pretending," he added. They paused. Then she asked, "Why did you reach out? Not just to help at the project, but why me?" He answered without blinking. "Because I missed the version of me that existed when I was beside you, and not performing for you." That landed. Heavy. True. She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, there was a trace of softness. "I'm not interested in going backward," she said. "Neither am I. I'm not looking for better than before. I want new, grown, not rushed. Me too." She took a breath, then leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I've done therapy. A lot of it. I've confronted the part of me that attracted chaos and mistook it for intensity." He smiled gently. "I've confronted the part of me that mistook ambition for self, worth, that used money to shield my shame." The air between them felt thick but clean, like the moment after a storm, when everything's wet but everything's clear. Then she asked the question he wasn't expecting. "Did you love her?" He didn't flinch. "No. I loved the attention. I loved being seen by someone who didn't require depth. But it wasn't love. Not even close." She nodded. "Not approval. Acknowledgement. I asked because I needed to hear you say it," she explained. Not because I was unsure, but because I want to trust again, and clarity is required. He understood. He leaned back, hands folded loosely. If we try again, he said slowly, I won't ask for the old rhythm. I'll ask for new steps, maybe even new music. Celia cracked the slightest smile. I've always liked jazz more than scripted notes. He stood and walked to the shelf, pulled out a record. No promises, he said. But this one doesn't skip. She watched him place the vinyl. The soft crackle began. Then the smooth hum of a saxophone drifted out. Celia stood too, walked over, and without words, he offered his hand. She hesitated, then took it. They didn't dance perfectly. There were no spins. Just two people swaying in a quiet room, under a dim ceiling light, with nothing to perform and no audience. No grand gestures, no make-up speeches, just presence, shared. After the song ended, they stood a moment longer. Then she stepped back. I'm going home, she said. Okay, I'll call you. Not tomorrow, but soon. Okay. She walked to the door, paused, then turned slightly. And when I call, I want us to talk about what it looks like to build again. Carefully, he nodded. I'll be ready. And she left. That night, Darian stood in the middle of his living room, record still spinning. No wine, no toast, just a man who had danced with the one woman who had seen him completely, and wanted to know if he could meet her there again. The first few weeks after that dinner passed without pressure. They didn't rush. They didn't post. They didn't announce. They simply talked. Sometimes over the phone, sometimes at the community center, other times, while volunteering on projects they both once supported, independently. Now, they served together. It was their shared ground, a place where no one expected a public reunion or a polished marriage. Here, they were simply Celia and Darian, project leads, facilitators, occasional lunch companions. And slowly, through the rhythm of ordinary tasks, they rebuilt what had collapsed in the noise of power, ego, and assumption. One Wednesday afternoon, Celia met Darian at a repurposed brick warehouse, now functioning as a training center for urban youth. The center had been short-staffed for weeks. Darian, stepping in as interim program advisor, had texted her the night before. If you're free, come help, no pressure, just kids, paint, and pizza. She came, hair in a bun, t-shirt, jeans, minimal makeup. He was already there, wearing a navy crewneck and sweats, sleeves rolled up, talking to a group of 11-year-olds about brushstrokes and patterns. When she entered, he looked up and smiled, not performatively, not nervously, genuinely. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled back just as easily. 3 hours later, after the final cleanup and the last group photo, they sat on the curb outside the building, sipping from bottled water. So, he asked, how's your studio project going? Quietly, she replied, I've got a small grant, enough to rent space. I've been sketching a mentorship model for art students, small groups, safe environments, one-on-one reflection. He nodded. You always had that clarity. You just needed time to stand without interruption. She turned to him. And you? What's life without the boardrooms and headlines? Messier, he admitted. But I'm finally hearing my own voice again. Not the echo chamber. Celia studied him. There was no arrogance in his tone. Just reality. I used to think your success was louder than your presence, she said. It was. But this version of you, I think he could lead without stepping on anyone's air. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. It was the kind of compliment that went beyond flattery. It was a witness statement. 2 days later, she invited him to her new studio. It was a modest space on the east side, bare concrete floors, high windows, a few canvases leaning against walls, and 2 long workbenches lined with brushes, sketchbooks, and jars of old pencils. He stepped in, looking around. I like it, he said. Why? It doesn't try to be more than what it is. It feels like you. She handed him a cup of herbal tea, then gestured to the back wall, where a large canvas hung unfinished. It featured an abstract image of 2 human silhouettes, one blurred at the edge, the other slightly cracked at the center. He walked closer. "Yours?" he asked. "Yes." "What's the story?" She paused, then said, "The blurred one is who I became when I kept molding myself around you. The cracked one is who I am now, solid but scarred, and healing." He turned, moved closer. "It's beautiful. It's honest," she replied. Then she looked at him. "I still have questions, Darian. I know. I still flinch when I think about some memories." He nodded. "So do I, but I'm willing to keep showing up," she said. He didn't respond with words. He reached out, gently placed one hand over hers where it rested on the bench. No grasping, no pulling, just contact, like a bridge. They started spending more time together, but with clear boundaries. Fridays were studio nights. Sundays were shared project meetings. Tuesdays, they exchanged long texts about the books they were reading. One evening, after a community mentorship event, Darian looked at Celia and asked, "Would you ever consider therapy together?" She blinked, not because it was offensive, but because it was unexpected. "I thought we were taking it slow," she said. "We are. But if we're building something new, it might help to have tools we didn't use the first time." She took a breath, then said, "I'll think about it." A week later, she sent him a screenshot of a couples therapist with a caption, "She specializes in reconnection and honesty. Let's try one session. No pressure to continue." Darian replied instantly. "Booked. Thursday at 4 p.m. No fear, no shame. Just presence, and a willingness to do things they never did when they were married." The office was tucked into the corner of a 3-story walk-up in Lower Manhattan. No building sign, no receptionist. Just a quiet door with the name Dr. Halen Vost printed in subtle grey lettering. They arrived separately. Celia walked in with a notebook in her bag. Darian brought nothing but a folded napkin with questions he'd written to himself. The waiting room had no music, no overpowering scent, just clean chairs and a small bookshelf stacked with psychology classics, poetry, and a few children's books. At exactly 4 p.m., the door opened. Dr. Vost stepped out, grey locks pinned neatly, black turtleneck, simple jeans, no clipboard. "Darian." "Celia," she greeted, voice warm but not forced. "Come in." They followed her into a soft-lit room with 3 armchairs and no desk. She gestured. "Sit wherever makes sense." They chose seats next to each other, not touching, but not distant either. Vost sat opposite, crossed her legs, and began simply. "I don't have a method I impose," she said. "You're both here voluntarily. That's the first thing we respect. You want to start over, not as strangers, but as people who've seen each other at their worst." "That's rare." Celia nodded. Darian's hands rested on his knees, steady. Dr. Vost continued, "Tell me one thing you've unlearned since your separation." A long pause. Then Celia answered, "I unlearned self-blame. I stopped thinking everything that went wrong was because I wasn't enough." Vost nodded. "Powerful." She looked at Darian. He exhaled. "I unlearned the belief that being needed made me valuable. I thought if I wasn't the solution, I wasn't worth anything." No one spoke for a few beats. Then Vost leaned in. "What's one truth you don't say out loud?" Celia didn't hesitate this time. "I missed him more than I admitted." Darian looked at her, then turned to the therapist. "I still carry guilt that I may not deserve a second chance." Vost didn't rush to respond. Instead, she asked, "Do you want to be married again?" Silence. Then Celia said, "Only if it's not a repetition. Only if I get to show up as me, not the version that made him comfortable." Darian added, "Only if we can live without performance, no public face, no private collapse." Vost nodded slowly. "Then that's where we begin. Not with what you lost, but with who you're becoming." The sessions became weekly. They didn't broadcast it. They didn't even label it. It was just 1 hour, every Thursday, to sit and name things that once went unsaid. Sometimes they argued, softly but with clarity. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes they cried without touching each other. They learned things they missed the first time. Celia admitted that Darian's absence at her first gallery event had quietly broken her. Darian confessed that he didn't know how to balance emotional transparency with the pressure to be perfect. They weren't trying to fix the past. They were learning how to see it without flinching. And with every shared truth, a new layer of trust formed, one not built on promises but presence. One session, Dr. Vost asked, "What does safety look like in your next version?" Celia said, "Being able to leave the room and trust I won't be misrepresented in my absence." Darian said, "Hearing hard truths without retreating into defense." That night, after the session, they walked together to the corner deli. Celia ordered chamomile. Darian grabbed a seltzer. At the sidewalk table outside, under the city's pulsing noise, Darian spoke. "You asked once what version of me I am now." She nodded. He said, "I'm the man who will pause before reacting, who will listen before defending, who will love without needing control." Celia looked at him. "You sound sure." He shook his head. "I'm not. I'm just willing." She smiled. "Not widely, but deeply. That's a good place to start." Weeks passed. Their connection grew, not from big gestures, but in how they made room for each other's voice. They cooked together on Fridays, volunteered on Saturdays, shared journal entries on Sundays. One evening, during dinner at her studio, Darian looked up and asked, "Do you think we could ever share a space again?" Celia froze mid-bite, then said, "You mean live together?" He nodded. "Eventually. If that ever feels right." She didn't answer immediately, then said, "It would have to be different. Separate offices, intentional check-ins, mutual resets. No old patterns," he added. "No expectations to perform happy," she said. He nodded. They ate quietly. Later, before he left, she placed a key on the counter. "It's to the studio, for emergencies, not for casual drop-ins." He understood. Boundaries, not walls. He pocketed the key. "Thank you." In therapy, Dr. Vost offered an idea. Consider a weekend retreat, just the two of you, not as partners, not as a couple, but as two people relearning companionship. They agreed. And next chapter, they'll face that test. If you've ever wondered whether love deserves a second chance, not with the same patterns, but with new honesty, this chapter proves it's possible. What part of Darian and Celia's healing spoke to you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to unlearn something in order to grow in love again? Share this episode with someone who believes in rebuilding trust the right way. Subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories so you never miss stories that heal, teach, and stay with you. Because love isn't always about starting over. Sometimes it's about starting forward. The cottage sat along the Hudson, tucked behind a thicket of cedar trees. No Wi-Fi, no TVs, no luxury. Just quiet. Celia arrived first. She unpacked slowly, not out of nerves, but to feel every choice. Her toothbrush. Beside the window, her journal on the side table, her sweaters stacked by color. Darian arrived an hour later. He brought one bag, 2 books, and a grocery tote filled with fruits, pasta, and a bottle of red wine. There were no assumptions. They had separate bedrooms. They'd agreed this wasn't a rekindling weekend. This was a recognition weekend. Who are we? Without an audience. Without pride. Dinner was slow. They chopped vegetables without speaking. They made eye contact often, but didn't fill silences with noise. The sauce simmered. The table was set for 2. Darian poured the wine. Celia served the plates. They ate in soft rhythm, like a dance that didn't need music. After the meal, they sat outside wrapped in blankets, feet resting on the wooden railing. The river below reflected the early stars. Celia sipped tea. Darian sipped wine. Then he said it. "I don't want to date someone new." She turned to him. "I don't either," she said. He looked back at the stars. "I want to date you. The version of you now. The one who doesn't soften herself for anyone. The one who calls truth by name." Celia studied him. "I want to know you without the filters." "I'll try," he said. No filters, no defenses. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But for the first time since the rupture, they breathed in sync. The next morning, they cooked breakfast together. Celia wore thick socks and a hoodie. Darian wore flannel pants and a white tee. They made scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee. No one fought over music choices. No one hovered. Just ease. After breakfast, they hiked. The trail wasn't long, but the incline tested their breath. They took turns leading. When Celia stopped to tie her shoes, Darian waited quietly. When Darian paused to check his phone, then remembered it had no signal, he laughed, and Celia joined him. They reached a lookout point and sat on a stone bench. Celia pulled out her notebook. Darian leaned back, eyes on the treetops. "Tell me something you regret," she asked. He didn't flinch. "I regret leaving your art hanging in the guest room for 3 years instead of our bedroom." She blinked. "You noticed." "I always did. But I thought showcasing your brilliance meant giving it a corner. I was wrong." Celia swallowed. "My regret," she said softly. He turned. "I stopped asking for affection when you stopped offering it. I acted like I didn't need it, but I did." Darian's voice dropped. "I wish I had reached out anyway." They didn't cry, but something lifted between them, like shame, leaving quietly. That night, Celia cooked dinner. Darian cleaned. Then they sat by the fireplace, both journaling. At one point, he glanced over. "What would it look like," he said, "if we decided to write new vows? Not because we're remarrying next week, but because our first ones were spoken by 2 people who didn't know what love required." Celia thought for a moment, then said, "It would look like this." She handed him her journal and pointed to a paragraph. He read, "If I love again, it will be with full breath. If I say I'm staying, it means I'll listen when it's inconvenient. If I fail, I'll own it. And if I ever feel small beside you, I'll speak before I vanish." Darian closed the book. "Your vows are better than anything I've ever written." "They're not vows," she said. "They're boundaries." "Then maybe mine will start there too." They didn't share a bed that night, but they both fell asleep with the fireplace still glowing. Hope doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it moves like a soft breeze through a window someone forgot they left open. The sun rose gently over the river, bathing the cabin in gold. Celia stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring out the window with her mug in both hands. She wasn't thinking about the past. Not today. She was thinking about this moment. The quiet, the man still asleep down the hall, the absence of tension. She turned as footsteps approached. Darian entered, rubbing the back of his neck, hair slightly messy, wearing the same tee from the night before. "Morning," he said. "Coffee's hot," she replied. He poured himself a cup, took a sip, and leaned against the counter. Then he asked something unexpected. "Would you let me cook for you tonight?" Celia raised a brow. "Here?" "Yeah, just us. One last dinner before we drive back." She hesitated, then nodded. Okay. They spent the day apart, by choice. Celia painted by the lake, her sketchpad resting on a folded blanket. She didn't force herself to draw anything meaningful. She just let her hand move. Darian stayed inside, writing. He jotted thoughts, phrases, and full sentences that may or may not become vows. No pressure, no structure, just truth. By 5 p.m., the house smelled like lemon rosemary and caramelized onions. Darian set the table for 2. No candles, no fancy napkins. Just clean plates and folded hands. Celia changed into a soft navy dress. Comfortable, not performative. When she stepped into the kitchen, she stopped. The lights were dim. Music played low in the background, an instrumental jazz track she once listened to while painting. He remembered. "You did all this?" she asked. He nodded. "Just wanted to say thank you for trying again." They sat. They ate, slowly, talked about the trip back, about Celia's next show, about Darian's decision to restructure his team so he could work less and live more. At one point she asked him, "What scares you most about starting over with me?" He didn't rush. "That you'll change your mind halfway through. That I'll be too late." Celia placed her fork down. "You're not too late," she said. "But I won't promise not to change. I can only promise to speak if I feel the change coming." Darian nodded. "Fair. I want us honest. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard," she said. After dinner they stood side by side washing dishes. No conversation, just warmth. When the last plate was stacked, Darian wiped his hands and turned to her. "I want to show you something." He walked to the table and brought back a folded sheet of paper. He handed it to her. She opened it. It was short. A man once believed control meant love. He learned silence meant fear. He watched the woman he loved walk out and never blamed her. Now he stands not to beg, but to build, not to impress, but to invite. If she ever wants to return, not to the man she left, but the one she helped him become, he'll be waiting. Celia read it twice, then folded the paper and placed it on her heart. "I'm not walking away this time," she said. He exhaled. "I'm not standing still either." They walked outside again, under the stars. Celia reached for his hand this time. He didn't speak. She didn't need him to. The silence between them was no longer a threat. It was peace. Later, back inside, she leaned on the doorway of her room and looked at him. "Stay," she said. He looked up. "In your room?" She nodded. "Just sleep. No pressure. I want to wake up and know you didn't leave." He nodded once. That night, they slept fully clothed, facing each other in the dark. It wasn't romantic. It was real. Forgiveness doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the form of staying. New York hadn't changed. Still loud, still rushed, still glowing with distractions. But Darian and Celia had. They didn't move back in together, not yet. Celia returned to her brownstone. Darian to his penthouse. But this time, no silence stood between them. On Sunday mornings, he picked her up for coffee and long walks down quiet blocks of Soho. On Wednesdays, she brought him homemade soup and sat beside him on the floor while he sorted business files he no longer wanted to keep. There was no talk of remarriage, just a focus on showing up. One morning, Darian sent a photo. It was a close-up of a frame on his office desk, her painting, the one he once hung in a guest room. Now, front and center, no caption. Celia responded with a heart. He didn't push the conversation, neither did she. It wasn't performative. It was personal. 3 weeks passed. Then one day, Celia stood outside Darian's office building, holding a medium-sized canvas. When he opened the elevator and saw her, his face shifted, surprised but not tense. "I'm not interrupting?" she asked. "Never." She walked in, canvas still wrapped in brown paper. "I finished something," she said. He cleared space on the wall near his bookshelves. She unwrapped it. A skyline, New York at dusk, but not the typical skyline. The angle was from below, from a quiet alley. The sky glowed gold, pink, and blue. Beneath it, a tiny couple held hands in silhouette. "Is that us?" he asked. Celia shrugged. "Could be." He stepped back, looked at the painting, then at her. "I want to try something," he said. "But it's big. I'm listening, not moving in, not yet. But I want to spend every weekend with you, intentional weekends. No phones, no guests, just us, in different parts of the city, Airbnb, hotels, even your place, wherever. I want us to date again, not fall into old patterns." Celia stared at him for a second. "Why weekends?" "Because I used to give them to everyone else, my team, my board, my ego. I want to give them to you now." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped close, stood on her toes, and kissed his cheek. "Ask me again Friday," she said, walking out. That Friday, he showed up at her door, 2 bags packed. One held a change of clothes. The other held groceries, wine, and a new journal. "No distractions weekend?" she asked. He smiled. Starting now, they stayed in, cooked together, watched a documentary on architecture, talked about their high school memories and what shaped them before success. At night, they lay side by side on her couch. "I missed this," he said quietly. She looked at him. This didn't exist before. He thought for a moment. "You're right. I missed what I thought we had. But this is what I want now." By Sunday night, they didn't talk about the future. They didn't have to. Their weekends were slowly becoming their rhythm. And rhythm was safer than fantasy. One afternoon, Darian met with his therapist. "I want to propose again," he admitted. "But I'm terrified I'll ruin it like last time." The therapist asked, "What would be different?" Darian answered without pause, "This time, I'll lead with apology, not possession." Saturday came with rain. It didn't ruin their plans. Darian had already prepared. He'd rented out a small art space in Brooklyn for the day. Not for a party, not for a performance, for a conversation. Celia didn't know the full agenda, only that he'd asked her to meet him there, dress comfortably, and bring nothing but herself. She arrived in jeans, a sweater, and her hair tied back. He was already inside, setting up a table with 2 glasses and a stack of envelopes. She walked in slowly. The space was quiet. Sun diffused through the high windows. "What's this?" she asked. "No pressure," he said. "Just stories." She raised a brow. He picked up the first envelope. "This one's titled, 'The Night I Lost You.' It's a letter to myself, not asking for forgiveness, just explaining where I failed you, for me to never forget." He slid it across. She opened it. The words were honest, sharp, self-critical, no self-pity. He outlined his failure to listen, his obsession with image, and the emotional weight Celia had carried alone. She finished reading, folded it carefully, and placed it beside her. "What's next?" He pulled the second envelope. "This one's called, 'What I Now Know About Love.'" It wasn't long. It simply read, "Love is attention. Love is absence of ego. Love is quiet presence. Love is apology without defense. Love is asking, not assuming. Love is earned, again and again." Celia didn't speak. She didn't cry. She nodded once. Then Darian stood. "I know letters don't change years, and I'm not asking for a yes tonight, but I do want to say something out loud, with no one watching, no cameras, no noise." He walked to the far wall, picked up a small canvas of his own. It was amateur, clearly painted by him. 2 stick figures, holding hands, with a speech bubble that read, "Let's make art out of the mess." He turned it toward her. Celia laughed, genuinely. "You painted that?" 2 whole hours, he said. "You're terrible," she said. "But honest." She shook her head, still smiling. He stepped closer, quieter now. "I'm not offering you a perfect man, Celia. I'm offering you a present one. No more promises. Just presence. I want to remarry you. Not to make things right, but because this us, this grown, raw, real version, is what I want forever." The room went still. Celia stepped forward, placed both hands on his chest. "Then let's build. No fireworks, no fancy venue. Just this. Just us." He kissed her forehead. They stood still. No music playing. Just 2 people choosing again. Not from the start, but from here. The next weekend, they sat at a small county clerk's office with 2 witnesses, Maya and Darian's mentor, Greg. No tux, no white gown, no champagne, just love that had been stripped, healed, and rebuilt with quiet courage. That night, Celia removed her earrings, placed them on the nightstand, and turned to Darian. "Do you regret how long it took?" He thought for a moment. "No. Because if we rushed, I would have still tried to win you instead of honor you." Celia smiled. "Good answer." She climbed under the blanket beside him. "You know this still takes work, right?" she said. "Every day," he replied. "And I've cleared my calendar for it." They didn't make love that night to mark the moment. They held hands and slept. Safe, present, together. The second marriage wasn't about proving anyone wrong. Not family. Not tabloids, not even themselves. It was about alignment. Celia and Darian didn't share their vows on a yacht. They shared them on a rooftop garden in Harlem, where Celia once taught, painting classes to neighborhood kids before her art took off. A close friend officiated. 10 people stood around them, mostly from her side, friends who stayed when her marriage cracked in the press. Darian's team wasn't invited, not because they weren't welcome, but because this wasn't a branding opportunity. It was homecoming. Their wedding vows were plain spoken. Darian said, "I'll never again treat love like a deal. I won't clock in and out of our connection. I'll serve, not manage. I'll ask before assuming. And I'll thank you even when pride tells me not to." Celia looked into his eyes and replied, "I won't test you, but I'll hold you to your words. I won't shrink to make us fit. I'll speak even when I'm scared you'll leave. And I'll walk beside you, not behind." No applause. Just soft tears, quiet nods, and the sound of wind brushing tree leaves. Their honeymoon wasn't in the Maldives. It was 3 days in a borrowed cottage in upstate New York with no cell, service, a shared journal, and a fireplace that needed constant stoking. They played board games, cooked poorly, danced to old jazz on a beat-up stereo. One night, while roasting marshmallows inside, Celia asked, "Are you afraid?" Darian didn't lie. A little. Of what? Of falling into old habits, of forgetting the little things. Celia nodded. "Let's make a rule. I'm listening. Every Sunday night, no matter where we are, we sit and ask each other, what felt heavy this week? What felt light?" Darian took a pen and wrote it in their shared journal. They signed it. Back in the city, married life wasn't glamour. It was rhythm. Tuesday mornings, they took turns making breakfast. Friday evenings, they had no talk time, just music and painting or reading quietly in the same room. They still fought. About bills, about business boundaries, about how Darian sometimes interrupted, about how Celia sometimes withdrew. But now, they had tools. A shared therapist. A code phrase when things got heated. Pause. Please. And their Sunday night ritual. Always. What felt heavy? What felt light? At one dinner, Maya visited. "You both seem quiet," she said. Darian smiled. "We're trying not to shout over our growth," Celia added, still growing. "Just less noise." Maya clinked her glass. To the quiet rebuild. One night, Celia was invited to speak at an art school panel. The topic, creating from pain. She paused before accepting. Darian encouraged her. "You don't owe them your trauma. But if it helps someone, maybe it's not about reopening a wound. Maybe it's about showing a scar that's healed." She went, spoke with grace. Afterward, 3 young women waited in the hallway. "You talked about leaving quietly. That helped me," one said. Celia smiled. "Sometimes, silence isn't defeat. It's a doorway." Back home that night, Darian had dinner ready. A note on the plate. "You teach with presence, not perfection." Celia kissed him. And just like that, another Sunday passed. Another week. Another chance. Together. 2 months after their quiet wedding, Celia received a call that changed their rhythm. Her mother had collapsed at church and was rushed to the hospital. Diagnosis: a small stroke. Not fatal, but serious. Celia took the next flight to Charlotte. Darian packed her things without asking. He ordered a car. Cancelled his meetings. "Don't worry about me," she said. "I'm not," he replied, pressing her palm. "I'm worrying with you." For the next 10 days, she stayed at her childhood home, caring for her mother. Darian called, but never hovered. He texted her at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Same message every time. "I'm with you." In thought. In full. Back in Manhattan, he cleared out the guest room and began converting it. He called a designer. Added grab bars. Ordered a hospital-style bed. Not because anyone asked. Because love had evolved. When Celia returned, tired and quiet, she entered the apartment and stopped. The guest room, now soft peach, clean-lined, and accessible. "I didn't ask for this," she said. "You didn't have to," he answered. She hugged him, longer than usual. "You're getting better at showing up," he whispered back. "I'm following your example." 3 weeks later, her mother moved in for a short stay. She watched them in silence, especially Darian. "You've changed," she told him. "I had to." "No, you chose to." One Sunday evening, after her mother had fallen asleep, Celia and Darian sat with their shared journal. Same ritual. "What felt heavy?" he asked. Celia answered, watching her struggle. "Feeling like a daughter and a wife at the same time. And what felt light? Coming home to you and not feeling like I had to carry both roles alone." Darian's throat tightened. "My turn?" he asked. "Please." What felt heavy was wondering if I'd messed something up while you were gone. "And the light?" He looked at her. "You, in my life again." They sat in silence, not empty, not awkward, just full. One night, Celia's mother had a fall, small but scary. Darian helped lift her gently, held her wrist steady, made tea. Afterward, while Celia checked her vitals, her mother called Darian to the side. "I used to think you were a nice boy playing husband," she said. "Now I see. You're the man my daughter deserved the first time." He didn't respond with words. He just nodded. Sometimes dignity is quiet. A week later, Celia's mom returned to Charlotte with a live-in nurse. The apartment felt lighter, but not in a relief way, in a release way. They had passed a test, not of love, but of partnership. No ring could measure it, only their actions. That Friday night, during their no-talk time, Celia brought out an old art canvas she never finished. She painted slowly. Darian poured wine, played soft R&B. As the final strokes dried, he walked over. The image was abstract, blues and golds and a thread of red pulling through the center. "What's the title?" he asked. She smiled. After all, he took her hand, and in that quiet moment, she said something she hadn't said in months. "I love you, not because of what you fixed, but because you let me fall apart safely," and still stayed. Darian didn't try to respond. He just held her tighter. 1 year later, they didn't throw a wedding anniversary party. They hosted an art and business workshop for young couples from Harlem and the Bronx. Those, starting from scratch like they once did, except with less noise and no safety net. Celia handled the creativity side. Darian ran a finance Q&A. No ego, no branding, just truth. The event was titled, "Start Forward," the same words Celia had written in the corner of their journal on the night of their second wedding. The workshop wasn't flashy. Foldable chairs, bottled water. A local band played live, but the room held something worth more than diamonds: perspective. Celia shared how she lost herself in her first marriage. Darian explained how control cost him peace, and pride cost him his partner. They didn't sound perfect. They sounded real. One woman, 24 and nervous, raised her hand. "What if the person you love isn't ready to change?" Celia smiled. "Then love them from a distance. Don't force readiness. Respect yourself enough to stay whole while they figure it out." Darian added, "I thought love meant always being right. I was wrong. Love means being ready to listen, not later, not when it's convenient, but now." They gave out free copies of their Sunday check-in journal template. On the back page was a quote, "You don't rebuild love by pretending nothing broke. You rebuild by becoming someone new together." After the event, they walked home. No limo, just sneakers and quiet steps. Darian held her hand. Celia leaned into his side. "I feel like we did something good today," she said. "You did," he replied. She stopped, looked at him. "No. We did." He smiled, still not used to hearing that. Get used to it, Mr. Hayes. I'm not leaving again." At home, the apartment was filled with soft light. Photos of their second wedding framed quietly on the wall. Their Sunday journal sat on the coffee table. The art piece titled, "After All," hung above the mantel. Later that night, Darian cooked. They didn't say much over dinner, not because there was nothing to say, but because they no longer needed to fill every space. Silence was no longer emptiness. It was trust. Celia brought out her phone, scrolled to a draft email she had written but never sent. Subject: to the woman he was with at Elara Noir. She had written it months ago. Angry, but never sent it. She read it again, then hit delete. Darian, watching from across the table, raised an eyebrow. "Old ghost?" he asked. "Deleted," she whispered. "Because peace is louder." Darian stood, walked over, and knelt beside her chair. Not dramatic, just steady. "I know we're married again," he said. But I want to renew our vows privately, just you and me, every year, not with guests, with intention." She cupped his cheek. "That's the man I waited for." He kissed her hand, and there, in the quiet of a life rebuilt, they sealed their next promise. The next Sunday, they didn't go out. They stayed in. Pancakes, no phones, no distractions. They laughed over burned edges, shared syrup, talked about nothing. Then, at 3 p.m. sharp, without either planning it, they sat together on the rug, their journal between them. Old habit, new layer. Darian turned to a blank page. "What do we call this entry?" Celia took the pen. 1 year, still listening. He read the question aloud. "What did I learn about you this week?" He answered first. "I learned you still paint your emotions when you can't find words." Celia smiled. "I learned you still freeze when you're scared. But now you tell me instead of shutting down." They filled the page slowly. No rush. Growth takes space. They closed the book. Darian looked around the room, the same space where he'd once stood, stunned by her walking out, now filled with quiet proof that she returned by choice, not desperation. "I used to think marriage was a contract," he said. Celia shook her head. "It's a practice," he nodded. "Like art, like healing." They sat in silence. The city outside moved fast, but their living room held stillness, safe, steady. A week later, they attended a friend's wedding. During the ceremony, the bride stumbled over her vows and began to cry. Everyone shifted uncomfortably. Celia reached over, held her hand. "It's okay. You don't have to be perfect," she whispered. "You just have to mean it." The bride calmed, finished her vows with shaky strength. Later, Darian pulled Celia close. "You did that for me once too," he said. She nodded. "And I'd do it again." Their second year of marriage began the way they'd never imagined the first could end, with friendship, with softness, with no audience to prove anything to. They didn't need noise anymore. They had a language that was theirs alone, a look across the room, a nudge when one held too much, a journal passed back and forth, a phrase repeated often, "Still here." On the last night of this chapter, they stood on their balcony. The Manhattan skyline buzzed below. Celia leaned into his chest. "I used to think love had to be dramatic," she said. Darian exhaled. "And I used to think it had to be earned through achievement. And now I think love is quiet. It's not what we say in public, it's how we show up when no one claps." She smiled. And in that moment, they said nothing else. They didn't need to. The silence was full. In the end, Celia didn't win because she left. She won because she returned, with terms, with strength, and with love that no longer begged to be seen. Darian didn't lose everything when she walked out. He lost when he stopped seeing her. And he got it back, not through grand gestures, but through patience, self-work, and humility. Their story teaches us something loud in its quiet. Love doesn't stay where it's not respected. Walking away isn't always the end. Coming back can be the real beginning, if both hearts have grown. And healing, real healing, looks like accountability, not apologies alone. They didn't need another wedding to prove anything. They built something better. A home with values. A routine built on truth. A marriage centered on practice, not perfection. If this story taught you anything about relationships, self-respect, or second chances, tell us in the comments. What was your favorite moment? Do you believe people can change, really change, for love? Let's talk about it below. And if you want more stories that explore what it means to fall back in love after breaking, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories right now. Because sometimes the strongest love stories are the ones that started with goodbye.